I say, well, happy Sunday, everybody. This is going to be an amazing Logic Live. I'm hoping that Randy McEntee is able to tune in, because Randy, I've got 4 live guests. I have absolutely no way to retain memory of anybody's name or title, so I'm going to have them introduce themselves. I have more presets set for like split screens than you have keyboard shortcuts available to you in Flame. And I already screwed up and didn't unmute myself before I started. So it's almost like you are here, even if you're not actually here. It's Sunday. Welcome to Logic Live, everybody. We're closing out the Summer of Flame 2022. I want to thank everybody for tuning in a little bit earlier today. I had a little bit of a schedule conflict and had to push the show back. So I want to say hello to all my friends out in on the continent who have tuned in. Hi, Christoph. Wait a minute. David Kreitz is here. Michael is here. Jeff, how are the levels? Now, Michael, you've been doing this with us here at Logic long enough to know that anything that happens in the pre-show doesn't count is not true. All right, here we go. I'm super excited. This is going to work. Ladies and gentlemen, Summer 22. Closing out. Hey, happy Sunday, everyone. My name is Andy. Welcome to Logic Live number 93, if you can believe that. Let's get right down to it. This is the Summer of Flame 2022 with Autodesk Jasmin Frenette, and we actually have 2 other members of the dev team here. We're going to talk about Flame development, but let's see if I can't make some sense of how... There we go. First, we want to thank our friends at AJA for sponsoring Logic Live. AJA, together with Flame since 2006. We also want to thank our newest sponsor, the Hot Spring. It's the future of VFX outsourcing. Hot Spring connects you to great artists to get your projects done, making it easier than ever to access the best talent in the world. We're going to have them on next week. I actually used Hot Spring on a project recently, and thought the experience was great. Can't wait to share that with everybody. And if you need tech support, be sure to call Jack Horrocks. By call, of course, I mean email, jack@flametech.com.au for all your Flame networking storage and custom build needs. Speaking of needs, if you need anything in the way of image processing plugins, there are none better than the ones from Boris FX. You can save 15% on any Boris FX product, standalone or subscription, when you use the code LOGIC-15 at checkout. Speaking of checking things out, be sure to check out the Logic merch store and make sure you look your best while doing your best Flame work. You can get that at logic.tv/ actually click the merch button at the top of logic.tv or forum.logic.tv. Want to take a moment to thank all of our patrons on Patreon. We are up to 137 members of the Flame community who are sponsoring what we do here at Logic. We could not do what we do without your support, and we thank you very, very much. If you'd like to support what we're doing, get access to some merch and exclusive content like the Q&A sessions we do after Logic Live, you can become a patron for as little as $5 a month by heading over to patreon.com/LogicTV and signing up. Speaking of the forum, this is for my friend Randy McEntee, who has poured his heart and soul into the forum. Here's some forum stats for 2022. We're up to 1,187 users. That's up 8 in the last week. 1.2 million page views. We had 92,000 page views in the last 2 weeks alone. And I think 91,500 of them had to do with the thread that I posted about today's show. So I want to thank everyone in the community for being so active. 10.4 thousand posts. It's up 3,800. And we're up to 471 users on Discord. I want to give Discord a shout out. Randy did a whole bunch of upgrades to the Discord server, created a whole bunch of new channels, and just made it a lot more intuitive. We now have more and engaging. We now have so many bots now running on the Discord forum that Elon Musk just called. He doesn't want to buy us anymore. So I want to thank Randy for that. But seriously, engagement on Discord has just kind of exploded in the last week. And thank you, Randy, for making all that possible. And thank you, everyone in the Logic community, for participating. If you want to join in on the conversation, go to logic.tv and click on the Discord button. Let's give a shout out to Logic Academy. We have new Logic Academies coming out next month, or maybe even as early as later this month. But I wanted to remind everyone of the classes that we introduced for 2022. The first is one on beauty techniques in Flame, done by yours truly. I cover topics like blemish removal, cleaning up blotchy areas, red eyes, eye bags, texture and color balancing, and all under the umbrella of working as efficiently as possible. And our friend Randy McEntee produced 2 Logic Academy courses. The first is on the machine learning time warp tool that was gifted to the community by Andre Toloshny. Randy goes over how to install on Mac and Linux, on various different installs of Linux and different hardware configurations. And then he goes into the different features of the machine learning time warp tool. There's time warp, there's fluid morphs. It's an amazing, amazing thing. He also made a video called Setting Up PyBox. PyBox is a feature in Flame that allows you to integrate Flame with other applications in your pipeline. So Randy shows how you can basically have Nuke as a node in Flame using PyBox. So that's Beauty Techniques in Flame, Setting Up PyBox, and the Machine Learning Time Warp, added to the Connect to Conform and Image Node courses done by our friend Jeff Kyle, and Intro to NDI and 8-Minute Aces are all available to you for free at logic.tv or on youtube.com/logictv. I want to thank our friends at Autodesk for sponsoring Logic Academy. Speaking of content from Autodesk, Grant Kay has been churning out content for the new 2023.1 release. If you go to the Flame Learning channel on YouTube, you can see great videos like updating the animation editor, 7 improvements for 2023.1, and also improvements on using Python in 2023.1. Thank you very much, Grant. And what else was there? Yes, he had a Flame capsule up within the last week or so about changing color values in the color sampler for using Flame. So definitely check all that out. Thank you, Grant Kay, for doing all that you do for the Flame community. And if you haven't already downloaded and installed Flame 2023.1, please do. I use it in production every day, and it's absolutely worth the download. My heart rate has increased by 45 beats per minute because now it's time. It's time to end the slideshow and get into what is clearly going to be the most technically challenging show I've ever put together. And that has nothing to do with the content. It's just with everything that I've set up. So welcome to Logic Live. This is our final installment of the Summer of Flame 2022. And we're going to have members of the Flame dev team on. We had Jasmin Frenette, who's the software development manager. Did I get that right? I did?
Yes.
I did. Thank you, Jasmin. We had him on last year for a wonderful insight into Flame from the developer's perspective. But first, let me introduce my co-host for today. You know him, you love him. I've upgraded my microphone here to sound just only half as good as him. Ladies and gentlemen, Jeff Kyle. Hello, Jeff.
Hi there. By the way, you sound great. I noticed right away
you sound great too.
Something was different about you.
Thank you. I've been working on myself. Thank you very much.
Very good.
That's where I was last week. It was I was taking some very much needed me time. No, but thank you, Jeff, and thank you for being on today. I know you and I are both beta testers for Flame, so we kind of have an insight or a relationship or an experience with the development team that I know I find very enriching and fulfilling. I like to say I spend more time with Flame than with my family. Just if you break it down with hours and the commute and everything, I guess not now that I work from home. But anyway, I spend so much time with Flame that the ability to kind of be in at the beginning and to give feedback and help drive development and is a very rewarding and enriching experience. And do you feel the same way?
Yeah, it's funny. I couldn't have said it better myself. I was kind of thrust into the beta experience when my company asked if I wanted to explore color grading in Flame, and that was right around when the image node and the effects tab was coming into play. So that was my foray into the beta program. And ever since, I've just been such a big fan of the process. It's like, it feels very unique to be like someone who is contributing to that whole, like, to the program that you're using. It's unbelievable. And I really do insist that as experienced or as inexperienced as you are, I think there's a lot that anyone can bring to the table, just from the different perspectives that you have, your background, what you're doing in Flame. I didn't really feel like a Flame expert, but I did feel like I was contributing in a pretty valuable way in my beta experience. And I think other people could feel that way as well.
Agreed. Even David Kreitz just said in the chat, beta program is great, and I couldn't agree more. You said you got into this when like the image node was being developed. I think when I first started beta testing, they had just introduced multiple resolutions in Flame. Oh my God. That's how old I am and how long I've been doing this. But it's I agree with you. It's a wonderful experience. Well, let's not keep our fans at home at bay any longer. I'm going to go ahead and do my absolute best to bring all of our guests on. Let's see if I push this button here. All right. Okay, good. Wow. You know what? This is going to be a good show. This is You know what? As we like to say in the visual effects business, it can only go downhill from here. But let's introduce our guests, and I'm going to try. So to my right, we have Jasmin Frenette, who is the software development manager for Autodesk, or for the Flame team. How are you doing, Jasmin?
I'm really good today. How are you, Andy?
Nervous as hell. Thank you so much for asking. Absolutely. And then this way, so below me, directly. Oh no, this isn't like Zoom. I've actually controlled this. So yes, okay. So directly below me and to Jeff's screen left. Thank you very much, Jeff. Is the other Jasmin who's joining us today, Jasmin Ra, and Jasmin is the senior software developer and a developer for Flame and the product owner of the graphics rearchitecting initiative. How did I do?
That's perfect.
That's great. You know things are good when I pronounced your name properly and completely butchered your title, which is good. So we've set the ground. And then let's see, just next to Jasmin is the aforementioned Jeff Kyle. Jeff, how are you?
Doing great.
Wonderful. And then rounding out our panel for today, we have Mathieu Sansregret, who is the senior software developer who is in charge of the transition to Apple Silicon. Am I correct?
Exactly.
And therefore you're speaking to us from an undisclosed location for the safety of you and your family. Is that from the Flame community? Is that just blink once for yes and twice for no? I think that's what we agreed to.
Yeah, hiding in the wood. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, let's, since we do have thank you all, of course, for coming on today and giving your time to talk with us. And I figure maybe the best thing to do is start with Jasmin Frenette and talk about the kind of the structure of the Flame development team, and we'll just take it from there.
All right, sure. Well, the development team structure is really quite simple. So on the director of the team is Steve McNeil, who has been with us for years. He's now dedicated to Flame. He always been, but he now really is passionate about moving Flame forward and meeting with clients. And he knows it all in the industry. I'm sure everyone knows him. If not, then I would encourage you to find out a bit more about him. He's
if
really
not, Jasmine's going to give out his home phone number at the end of the show today, so you too can get to know Steve McNeil. I'm sorry. Back to you, Jasmin.
Well, I was just saying he's a really smart guy, I think, and I have 100% confidence in his work, and he's really accessible as well. I can talk to him anytime I want, and that's the same for all the members of the dev team. And so he's now responsible of the project management duties as well. So he took over from Will Harris into this role. And he wants to involve the development team as well in this endeavor. So the dev team under him are the two project managers, so Fred Warren and Stéphane Labrie. And so those are product owners, so basically responsible for them talking to clients and gathering client inputs, and they're also designers, so making sure the feature work as they should and meet clients' needs and fix client problems, basically. And under Steve is also Louis Martin, who's a development manager for the Flame team. And under Louis Martin are all of the teams that are actually doing the sausages, as you said. So each team is responsible for an area of the software. So we have a team that's responsible for the graphics revamp that we're going to talk about in a minute. We have teams that are responsible for integrating new codecs or integrating new OSs. We have team for user-facing features such as animation channel updates and things like that that we call the usability team. And we have other teams for the cloud and other initiatives. So these teams' size are varying with time. Sometimes they grow depending on the needs and on the difficulty or the amount of work we must need to perform the work. So that's pretty much the development team. And then we have documentation experts that are working with us. We have Grant that's making the videos. We have other teams outside of the dev team, like support, marketing, the sales, and all the Autodesk system is helping our development team into making this happen. So that's pretty much the team, and most of the team members are super talented. I'm really fortunate to be working here. I've been working with Autodesk for more than 20 years, and I hope I can continue working here because the product is super cool, and the people are great as well. They're all really kind, and everybody wants to help each other. There's no big egos in the team, and I think most of the people feel this way. Like I think most of the people in the team are there for more than 15 years working on Flame or related family products. So I think it tells a lot about the passion and dedication of the team members and how we feel working here.
That's great. That's great. I wanted to remind everyone at home, if you have questions for any member of the team here, please put them in the chat. There were a bunch of questions posted on the forum in the Epic thread there, and we're going to cover as many of those today as we can. But yeah, I figure why don't we get started? Do you want to? You know, you have a presentation you wanted to show, right?
Just before the presentation, I may go. I talked about it last year, but I wanted to talk a bit more about how we select features or this process, just in 2 minutes.
Sure.
So basically, Steve is now responsible for driving the vision of the product. So basically, decide where Flame is going into the next 10 or more years, but let's say mid to long-term vision. And he doesn't do this in a vacuum. So he talks with a lot of clients, other software vendors. He knows what's going on in the industry and everything. And he wanted the Flame team to be involved with him as well in taking these decisions. So lately, he actually invited us to a lot of client sessions. So I think I've been to 20 or 30 client sessions, and product owners were there as well. Louis was there as well, and Grantke assisted. The development team members were also invited into some of those sessions, and it was really, really nice to reconnect with the clients and see what their workflows are right now with the pandemic that has somewhat changed their workflows and everything. And we asked clients, what were their problems, if Flame could help them, make them more successful in some way. So we had really nice chats and honest chat with a lot of clients recently, and we're going to continue to do so. And I would invite people, if you want to contribute and give your feedback, we're always listening, and you can contact Fred or Stefan, and we'll get in touch with you and gather your feedback. So basically, feedback from clients is not the only way to build a vision. So of course, beta forums and beta clients are also there to help us doing so. We look at the forums like Logik Forums to see what are the topics that are always coming up that we might need to address, or things we might need to work on. We have the dev team is also suggesting ideas to product management. For example, if we're at a conference and there's a cool new algorithm that is able to do some new functionality, then we might talk to Steve about it and discuss this with the team. Steve also wants to know if there are part of the team, part of the code that's maybe not quite apt to evolve and move forward. So he will ask us, should we invest in fixing this before? So he's really, he's coming from a development background as well. So he's really technical, and he can understand these things. And, so much source, he's in contact with other developers, with partners, with potential partners, new technologies. He keeps aware of he's aware of whatever goes on in the industry, competitors and everything. So it's a combination of all these things that drive the vision, and he's involving the development team as well to help him achieve this. And then from this, and then it's up to us to basically prioritize projects based on what makes the most sense to drive Flame forward and to address most of the users' needs, because our user base is quite diverse. So we try to find features that will help the most clients and going forward, and then we prioritize those, and we're there to help with the product owners into moving problem solving into actual solutions that we can implement in the software.
I know I've told this story before, probably on Logic Live, but I used to love going to the sessions at NAB where we'd go into the suite, we'd sit down, everyone would take their water or their soda or whatever it is that was offered, and then like the PowerPoint presentation would start, and it was I was there with Jay Schulte, who's like started Logic on Facebook so many years ago, and he was from ILM, and I was just Andy from a commercial place in New York, and like you put up the list of like these are the 10 things that we could work on. Pick the 2 that you'd like, and like the left column was basically what became connected conform, and the right column was basically what became like physically based shading in action. And you know, Jay was just like, I don't care about any of that conform stuff. I never use it, but you really need to make all of these changes to action. They're very important to me. And I went, well, I have no idea what you're talking about. I've never heard of physically based shading, and I conform every day for a living in Flame. So I would like you to ignore that whole column and just focus on this. And for me, that kind of encapsulated the like Flame user base is a very diverse group, you know, with a very, and everyone's needs are the most important thing to them. And so how do you solve that? You know, it really spelled out for me in a tangible way what the challenge is to developing an application that is so important to so many different people in so many different markets who have so many different needs. So wonderful.
So we can move into our presentation. Actually, Jasmin Frenette is going to start with the first part of the presentation.
All right.
I'll let you move on from here, Jasmin.
Yeah. So, so first of all, Andy, thank you for having me. So, for everyone here, so my name is Jasmin Frenette. I'm a senior software developer in the Flame team. I've been in the Flame team for over 10 years now, and I've been working at Autodesk for over 17 years. And totally agree with Jasmin on this. So, Flame team, we have a great team. It's always a pleasure to work with everyone. I've been working with Jasmin for so many years, and Mathieu also. So yeah, so my goal here is to basically talk about this very challenging and exciting project called the graphics re-architecture. So next, you want to change the slide, Jasmin? Do we want to start by reading this, or?
Sure. I mean, the statements is basically to remind viewers that whatever we discuss here might not even see the light of day in a product. That's our intention, but we never know what can happen. So this is just to remind these.
Okay. So so yeah. So for the next slide, so basically, we want to make sure that the future of Flame, that we're in a great position, right? Do you want to change slides? Thank you. So basically, we want to make sure that we're in a great position to be able to leverage all the new generation hardware capabilities and performance, right? So we always keep this in mind. So this is our vision. This is why we're working on this right now. And also, we want to have a robust modern graphics architecture that's able to scale easily on new GPUs, and will make our lives easier for implementing new features. So if we move on to the next slide, so what's the reality today in Flame? So Flame is a very old code base, and we are currently relying on OpenGL as our graphics API. So we'll talk about OpenGL and what it is in a few slides. Obviously, I won't go into many details, but OpenGL is very limiting as a graphics API today, especially how it's implemented in Flame. So we're not able to take fully advantage of all the performance optimizations that new GPUs are giving us today. We're already seeing a lot more investment by GPU manufacturers in newer and modern graphics APIs like Vulkan and Metal. And I'm not sure if you are all aware of this, but OpenGL has been deprecated on the Mac for several years now. So we always know that when something is deprecated on a platform, there's always a risk that the support for this feature is going to be pulled out at some point. So So what are the goals of this re-architecture? So obviously we want to modernize the graphics architecture of Flame so that we're able, like I said, leveraging new capabilities, easier integration, and better optimization. But um, the byproduct of all of this work is to be able also to secure Flame's future on the Mac. So we want to make sure that if anything happens in the future, that we're in a good position, that we're supporting Metal, which is the low-level graphics API on Mac. And yeah, so that's pretty much in a nutshell the actual goal of this project. So I can go in a lot of details or not too much, but I'll just skim over this part. But talking about different graphics infrastructures. So, like I said, Flame is using OpenGL. What is OpenGL? So many of you here probably know, but just to make sure, so OpenGL is a graphics API. It's used in Flame to render, to draw UI in the screen. So it's considered a high-level API. So what does that mean? It's very easy to use, but it's very limited and it's very generic, right? So it's not very efficient. There's no real multi-threading for OpenGL. But so this is where we need to move to a lower level modern graphics API like Vulkan or Metal. So these new APIs have been out for around 7 or 8 years. So whereas OpenGL has been out since 1992, if I recall. What does Vulkan or Metal provide that OpenGL does not? So these APIs are level in the sense that they allow the developers or softwares to implement everything. So we have total control on everything that is happening on the graphics card. The byproduct of this is that we have to configure everything. We have to manage all the textures, the resources, the pipelines. It's very complicated. But if it's done in a right way, you can leverage and have great performance. Like you can totally be. It's not even in the same ballpark as OpenGL. So you obviously have multi-threading capabilities, so you could render multiple things on the GPU at the same time. So that's pretty much it. So if we move on
So
to
the good news is that you have control over everything, but the bad news is that you have control over everything, and now you have to
Exactly.
control everything, right? Gotcha.
So yeah, so obviously you have a lot of control, a lot of responsibility, but if it's not done in the right way, it could work against you, right? So it's very tedious work. It has to be very optimized. And it's, like I said, it's very new also. So not a lot of people know how to work in Vulkan. There's not a lot of Vulkan developers out there or Metal developers out there. So very new to us. Not anymore. Obviously, we're pretty much experts right now. But in the previous slide,
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Right.
in the
Oh,
previous
no.
slide,
Looks like we lost Jasmin.
oh,
So let me take over. So, oh, there
No,
you go,
he's there.
Jasmin. Okay. Yeah, you went out for a second.
oh, sorry about that. Yeah, I'm not at home, so I don't have the internet is not perfect. But sorry about this. So yeah, so the slide before this, what you saw, I think it was the example for the lines. Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Jasmin. So this is a quick example of what it looks like to draw a single line in OpenGL. So it's 4 lines of code, very simple. And on the right is an example of drawing 1 line in Vulkan. So as you can see, it's not the same thing at all. So you obviously every time you want to draw a line, we won't write that much code, right? So we have to create our own abstractions and helper utilities to make this easier. So a lot more responsibilities on the developer side. This obviously is a very simple example. It's just lines, but when we're talking about resource management and pipeline configurations, I mean, this is something completely different, very much more complicated. And in one of the GDC conferences a few years back, when we were introduced Vulkan for the first time in our team, the presenter said that Vulkan is like receiving all the pieces of a Ferrari and then you must build it yourself. So that's totally true. So it really comes down to the actual development and the way it is implemented. This is how Vulkan will give a lot more optimization. So, but we have to be careful. So for the project overview, so basically, what are the challenges of this project? So I think it's pretty obvious. Flame is very old, 30 years plus old. So we have a lot of components to convert. OpenGL is extensively used in the code base of Flame. We have custom UI, we have different rendering engines in Flame that need to be converted, different special cases. We have matchboxes, custom shaders. So a lot of components need to be converted. And the other challenge is that we're basically up against a highly curated OpenGL driver implementation. So OpenGL has been around for a long time, and a lot of people have contributed to OpenGL in the many years, right? So there are many utilities out there that help developers make this implementation even easier for them. These utilities are not always available on Vulkan or Metal, so oftentimes we have to contact Apple or Kronos, which is the group that is responsible for the Vulkan specification. So we oftentimes need to contact them and see what we can do together to work together to have these utilities available to us. If this is not something possible in the time range we are giving ourselves, then we basically implement these things ourselves. So we have to be careful when we approach these problems. So, and the other challenge, obviously, there's a lot more challenges than this, but these are the main ones. The other one is supporting third-party libraries, right, and codecs. Once we start leveraging Vulkan, if we want to leverage the full potential, we need to make sure that all the third parties are talking the same language as us, right? So if we have codecs that are feeding us some OpenGL textures, and we're in Vulkan, then obviously there's a little of an interoperability that needs to happen in that space, right? And we want to avoid these as much as possible. So we always constantly talk with our third-party vendors to make sure that they are also working on this conversion. And 90% of the time, this is the case. Like most of the third-party libraries that we are using are supporting Metal or Vulkan, so this is awesome. But some of them aren't, and we are actively working with them to get there, right? So, so for the next slide, I think this is the strategy. Thank you, Jasmin. So how do we approach this? Like we have a huge code base, we have multiple components that need to be converted. So the approach that we took is basically an iterative stage approach where we've converted components by component in Flame, right? So we're not converting everything at once. It wouldn't make sense. So we've identified all the different components in Flame, and there are a lot. And we've converted these in the last couple of years to Vulkan. And you may not know this, but today in Flame, you are already using Vulkan in multiple places. We've kept this silent. We haven't really communicated this right now, but before. But this is the case today. So Flame is already using Vulkan in some cases. And this is great for us because it gives us a lot of coverage with the betas and all the previous releases that we had. So, and another strategy is the two-pronged approach, where basically we don't convert everything to native Vulkan or Metal by default, right? Because when you do this, this is where you want to get the most bang out of the buck for maximum benefit, right? So what we do is we've identified like the core components, things that need to be natively supported. So we put more effort in these cases. But for other places, other areas we've identified that are non-critical, we have other ways to achieve this, which makes the process a bit lighter and allows us to get this project going and not doing this forever, right? Because we can't invest forever on this exactly. So this is another strategy that we've used. And finally, we're very much automation driven, right? So every single day we add more to the automation, more test cases, and we run this every single day. Actually, we run this like 5 or 6 times a day, and we're just making sure that everything is working. And when we see something that's not working, we optimize this, we change it. So, so we're making sure that Flame is working perfectly with Vulkan. And like I said, currently we have Vulkan and OpenGL at the same time. So this is another challenge, obviously. So for the next slide, conclusion. Already, okay, so that went that went fast. So yeah, so like I said, basically we're already supporting Vulkan in some components. We expect more components to be delivered in the following releases in Vulkan. So as we go, so we'll keep you guys posted on this. So make sure that in the coming beta programs or beta events that you participate. So we encourage all users to join us in these events and test as much as possible, because this gives us a lot of data, and we're making sure that the core Flame is working correctly with Vulkan. So that's pretty much it. So thank you for listening.
That's great. That's great. Let me bring everybody on. I just want to throw on the screen here. There it is. This was, I think it was Fred who put this on the forum in that thread. If you are interested in becoming a beta tester, please send an email to Martin here at Autodesk.com and mention that you want to join the beta program. I had a quick question for you. I'm actually curious to hear about the automation and the automation of testing. Can you describe a little bit? I'm envisioning that you have like a humanoid robot who, with a pen like this.
Exactly.
Maybe he's wearing a Logik shirt. Maybe she's not. I'm not saying, but that kind of just goes and tests things out. But no, what kind of things are you testing? How is it automated? If you're allowed to say or abstracted in any way that you can, because it sounds interesting.
I don't think there's any problem. Mathieu, do you want to take this one on the automation suite or?
So we kind of divide like the software in different suites, right? And there's tests to test like different section of the code. There are sections that are easier to test than other, and the example that you said about like using your pen and moving, that's some stuff that is not easy to automate, right? Because you have to simulate the user will press at this location on the screen, which has a button under it. And so if we move button around and stuff like that, then it can like break the automation and make it more difficult to have good result. But besides that, if we can use specific section of the code where we can like test and see, for example, rendering. If we put these operator, we should get that result, and with some sort of precision. So if at some point, we don't get the same result there, it means that somebody and did a change that modified the output. So we have to see if it's a if it's a good change or not. Do we have a problem that was introduced and stuff like that? So there's a lot of section and all the thing about like the wire tap and stone and wire, and so we have suites for almost all components of the software to be able to identify rapidly if there's a change that broke something.
And one, I would add to this that one of the challenges we have is that we support so many platforms and different configurations that we do have multiple configurations on the automation. But this is where, again, beta testing is helping us a lot, right? Because we can't cover every single platform or configuration on the automation. That's also a challenge for us.
I was thinking about that as you were showing the slides, or one thing I was thinking about rather as you were showing the slides is that Flames, like everything has to look the same in terms of the output. You have so many things that were written. I mean, even thinking about Matchbox shaders, just as an example, that that there's a Matchbox shader that somebody's relying on that they've had for 15 years, and it's all based on OpenGL. And you've done this work under the hood to transition over to Vulkan, and that render has to look the same.
Exactly.
And just take that one very small example and multiply it across the entire application. You really can appreciate how big of an undertaking this kind of transition is, and that it has to be right.
Yeah, actually, a big part of the transition was to actually beef up the automation system and add more tests and more tests and more tests to make sure everything single line that we changed was tested and could behave the same way as before. Just to come back to the automation system, basically every time we write a change to the code and we submit it to our build, the automation gets rerun. Like all the suites are being run testing our change. So we have a big bunch of machines that are available just to do that, and that do this like 20 hours a day, just running tests and on the code. And we have a lot of different machines, like Jasmin was saying. Like we have some Linux bugs, some Mac, different Mac OS version, different Linux drivers, different NVIDIA drivers. Like everything we support has to be tested. So, and obviously we cannot test everything at each build, but we try to rotate and make sure the build gets tested eventually on all these platforms.
Wild. Interesting. I also remember, and if I'm butchering the words or the description, forgive me, but I remember, Flame in way back in the day, was really built around not just OpenGL, but it was built around like specific NVIDIA drivers. Like it was tied to certain hardware. Like the software was tied to hardware. And I don't even mean just like SGI or anything. And so I remember, the unbundling of that was a huge undertaking, and I'm sure it's a process that's still ongoing, based on the slides that you presented, Jasmin, right?
And it was actually quite satisfying for me. Like last year, I went to a lot of like fix me for this NVIDIA driver that had like this issue. We had to do this and this and this, and I was like, this NVIDIA driver isn't around for like, has been deprecated like 10 years ago. So do we still need this? And most of the time we didn't. So while redoing everything in Vulkan and in Metal, we could just simplify the code and get it straight. And it's really cool to be able to revisit all those specific code that we no longer need.
Right. It's got to be very refreshing, to just put it in that folder and then just think about it fondly as something that was happened in the past. Why don't we talk a little bit about the transition to Apple Silicon, because it is something that is certainly happening. It is relevant, and someone put in the thread on the forum, they described the transition to Apple Silicon as like a development tax. Like it's not something that y'all asked for. You have to do it, and there you go. And I think it was last year, Jasmin, when you were on, you explained to us that Flame had, I mean, it was like over 100 external dependencies or like third-party dependencies, and even if one of those has not been optimized for Apple Silicon, the application then technically is not native, right?
Well, it's not. It can't link technically, so we can't even compile it. So
okay. So then it's
no-go.
Definitely not native. Yeah, it's a no-go. So how's Mathieu? How's that project going? And where are we at?
Yeah, it's going well. And yeah, Apple is not an easy platform to develop on, right? Because they're changing their security stuff. They're changing their stuff often. So we need to adapt. Every version, every new OS version has its own challenge. So, and now with the Apple Silicon project, then that's another level, right? We have to recompile all our code to it's a new compiler. It's not a new OS, but not that far, because we have to recompile all our code with a new compiler, a new architecture, right? So there's challenges for that project also. So if you can start with we can go with the slide, or that point, or
there we go.
Yeah. So so I've been working for Autodesk for the last 22 years. So
not on the Apple Silicon transition. Let's just make that very clear.
On and not only on Flame. So I've been working on Combustion and Lustre also, and on different projects also. And and for the Apple Silicon project, so it's a new compiler, and so instead of running on the Intel processor, which the x86 64, then that's a new processor, the Apple Silicon one. So it's a new so we're using a different compiler, right? And we're using, so it's really, and yeah, so it's a new compiler. So we have to compile all our code base, all the dependencies that we have on third parties to be able to run natively on the Apple Silicon processor. Presently, right, we are building the, as before, the Intel architecture, and we are able to run on the Apple Silicon chip because we are going through the Rosetta layer. So the Rosetta layer translates the Intel instructions into the native one. So that has a cost, right? Because Rosetta has to do a translation. So there's a small, but yeah, there's a small cost to go through that translation layer. If we build the code natively, then it will be faster. So, but to build the code natively, then you have to build all Flame source code and all its dependencies. So that's a challenge for this project. Yeah. So when we're talking about Silicon native or Intel, there's also the notion of universal binary, which in fact combines both architecture in the same build. When we are combining these two builds, right, it comes with some cost. So first, you have 2 times your application. You have one that runs on Intel and one that runs on Apple Silicon. So it means that your application is 2 times bigger, 2 times bigger to download, to install, to, so there's a cost there. And also on our side, right, there's 2 times, it takes 2 times the time to build it also. So yeah, so when we are building, so before we can try it and run it as a Silicon native build, we have to have all the pieces there, because we cannot try it until everything links together. So that was the first part, to one, identify all our third party, make sure that we contact them if they are providing binaries to us, or if it is open source code, we need to compile all those third party with the new architecture, right? And after that, after we get all these components, then we can try to run and see if we are having like a performance gain and so on, and problems also, because it can come with problem, with, because it's a new compiler, it will maybe have some specific bug related to that compiler. So yeah, so on the point for the architecture, for example, the plugins. So if we want to run and to be able to load a specific plugin, that plugin also needs to be compiled with the natively on the platform. So that's another challenge for that. So if you are using OpenFX plugin so these will need to be converted, because if they are not converted, then you won't be able to just load it. So the application won't be able to load that plugin. So yeah, so to do the conversion, we needed to, like I said, so ask the different third party and partners that we are dealing with if they have a version, if they plan to have a version running natively on Apple. So and yeah, so we have also to do our own source code, to do also to ask the Autodesk internal components, like we are using, for example, there's the CR, which is the crash reporter, right? We have the ADP, which is the Autodesk that to gather the information and statistic about the usage of the software and stuff like that. So these, and also the licensing part. That's all also pieces that we have to get to have to be able to link Flame and to have an application that runs natively on the platform. So if we go, yeah, so if we go, so it was fairly, it was easier than expected to compile just a Flame source code and to see which, if we have like some specific code related to the Intel processor, and because you have also instruction that are like the SSC instruction that are really specific to the processor. So in that case, converting those specific Intel instruction into Neon, which is the new instruction used by the Apple Silicon processor, it was simpler than expected on our side. So that went well. So we were able to convert all our code and be able to compile all our objects. But like I said, when all our objects are compiled, then we have to get all the other pieces that we are using and all the third parties. So at some point, so we are now able, so we've been able to compile these. We have over 75 third parties. Like I said, open source one, so we had to compile them to make sure that we are able to compile them on the new architecture. So we are now at the point where we can run Apple natively, run Flame natively on Apple Silicon, and we are just at the at the stage where we are trying it, see if it runs, and we ran the automation test suite on it. So it's 13,000 tests, and we are glad to see that it's working. The numbers are better than we expected. Yeah, so that's going very well on this side. But after we are able to link it and running, then we have to chase for we have still problems about threading, and what about the performance, and what about the other, because there's some unknown, right? Because it's a new architecture.
So that's the overall summary. So we would like everyone to consider joining the program if you have the time to. Of course, it's a time investment, but I think it's worth it for you and for us as well to get more feedback on these projects. And the beta testing of these two projects is going to start soon.
Excellent. Let me just put the where did it go? There we go. Let me just put that up on the screen again, and I'll put it in the it's linked in the thread. But if you're interested in being a beta tester, here's the email address. And as Jeff and I can attest, there is a time commitment, but it's absolutely a wonderful process to be a part of. Adam Taylor in the YouTube chat responded this way to what Mathieu was describing. Sounds like wrestling greased eels. Amazing the devs can figure this out, which is absolutely quite a visual you've painted there, my friend. Thank you, Adam. Cool. Well, just moving right along. Jeff, did you have any questions for the team?
Yeah, two, if that's all right. I think, well, I am such a layperson when it comes to this subject of development stuff. But when it comes to writing code for different, is the word different architectures? Is that how it's described?
Yep.
Um, is it a thing to make, like, once you have the code written for both, is it identical in both, or are there always going to be these subtle differences that you're never going to get around?
Right, you are writing code, right, and the compilers like optimize it to so that it runs like faster and on each processor. But the thing is that the optimization that it's done, right, it's not the same on both architectures. So sometimes it works great, sometimes not so much. So every architecture has its own challenges. So we'll see, because like, for example, the threading for the Intel and Apple Silicon, it's not the same at all. It's not the same concept. It's not done the same way. So we'll have to test and see, is it like performing properly with on that architecture. But the code in itself is not that different. The things
Hmm.
that the compilers can do different thing with it.
It's also true for Vulkan and Metal, for example, because we try to write the code as common as we can, and then have a layer below just to each languages. But there are some things that Metal cannot do, for example, and that Vulkan does. So we have the choice of like either implementing it ourselves in Metal, and then hope for the best that it matches Vulkan. Not hope for the best, but you know what I mean. It's but we
Pray.
try. We
Resort
try
to ritual
to get
sacrifice.
the code as common as possible, because it's easier to maintain and to test. And yeah, but we could have done some optimization specific for Linux, for example. But if we do so, then we have to make sure it at least the rendering is the same on Mac, even though we've taken some special steps for one specific platform.
So is what you're saying then that, like, if I have, from a working flame artist perspective, if I'm thinking back to an archive I have from a couple of years ago, if the archive was built under one architecture, and then in like maybe this year or next year it's a new architecture, do I have to be, is what you're saying that maybe something like a blur node, it's pretty straightforward of a node with like discernible algorithms to create it. I don't have to be too worried that my blur node from one architecture will look different from another architecture. But maybe there are other subjects that are a little bit more complicated than that, they might be a little bit different, but hopefully it's close enough that it's not a big deal. Is that correct in assuming that and talking about
Yeah,
that?
I guess so. We try to maintain the integrity of the rendering, almost the same on each platform. There is a certain minimal threshold that we have to meet. It will never be like pixel perfect, but it should come out visually identical. The only thing that comes to mind is for example, some limitations of the hardware, like anti-aliasing. Some of the older Mac were only going to, I don't know, 4x or something like that. So that's the only thing I could see as a difference between the platforms.
Cool. Great. Thank you. And I have one more question. This one was from Andy Dill from the community, but it's also close to my heart because I love thinking about this subject, and hopefully it's a lower hitting, a little bit easier subject than the one I just asked, at least. But it's really maybe just going around the table here and talking about maybe what is a normal day in the life of your role at Autodesk. Like, what are, like, the big picture? We got a good idea of kind of your tasks and your big project assignments, but what is, like, I don't know, what does your day on Wednesday of next week look like? If you had to go through, maybe we'll start with
I
uh,
could start.
one of the Jasmines. We'll start with you.
Yeah, so I mean, like everyone here, Jasmin, Mathieu, we're seniors, we're technical leads also. So I would say most of our days are basically supporting others mostly, and we're always keeping up with the latest stuff. So, but supporting the team is mostly our biggest uh, is what takes most of our days, I would say. But we're also managers, like I said, tech leads, and we are developers, right? So we also need to get in the nitty gritty and start coding these things. So, but I would say, yeah. So next Wednesday, I will be supporting most of the team, and I will be developing and implementing more Vulkan features and conversion, and that's pretty much our days. And I would say this is true for most of the software companies out there, but we're pretty much hybrid now. So we're all working from home. So the teams are all remote, and I would say that's for the best. I mean, we're even more proficient and efficient than before with these. We often go back to work, but it's very remote, and we're not wasting 1 minute, and it's very efficient the way we work right now. So. And Jasmin, do you want to?
I think we might need to throw that to Matthew, actually.
Okay.
We're having a technical
So
difficulty.
next Wednesday. So now on the Apple Silicon way, yet we need to have new like build machines, right? New automations machine to be set up so that we can build like 4 times a day the build on Apple Silicon and run the automation test to see where we're at with the process. So I have, yeah. So one of my job is also to set up these build machine and make sure we build and be able to send the build and install them for the automation tests. So yeah, and every day, right? We have to look at the automation test result and see if they are green and stuff like that. So that's pretty much what I'll do next Wednesday.
If I could just jump in, next Wednesday is there's a scheduled Apple event. Will your entire team be also in a secure location? All sharp objects will be removed from the just again, blink once for yes and twice for no. I have. Hold on, let me bring the other Jasmin in. There we go. So Jasmin Frenette, your next Wednesday schedule looks like.
Yeah, a couple of one-on-one with my employees. We usually meet every 2 weeks to just get in touch and see if they need something and discuss things that are happening. And most of my time is spent developing features or fixing bugs. So actually coding and debugging. I would say debugging more these times. Just seeing if I wrote what I wrote behaves like I thought it would, and most of the time it does not. So you have to go with it line by line and see where what you thought was right isn't. So that's most of my day.
Gotcha.
Thanks for sharing.
Yes, in the process, I completely blew away my preset for having all 5 of us on screen. So I was like, oh, well, let me bring Jasmin on full frame, and now I'm down here, and Jeff is up there, and that's kind of hello. I wanted to see if we could do real quick, just maybe a couple of the questions that were in the forum. Let's see here. Brian Bailey had asked how much time you spend testing on Mac versus Linux, or is it just kind of just the same across all platforms?
So the automation tests run on both platforms, right? And on different, like Jasmin said, on different version of the OS for these. And on the dev team, there's some developers that prefer to work on Linux, and some of them prefer to work on the Mac if it's not really tied to a specific OS. Like I'm on the Mac presently, but yeah. So everyone can work on the platform that they choose. So yeah, so we're splitting
on the graphics architecture work, we're pretty much 50-50, I would say, because we have to implement Metal, Vulkan, so we have to test on both platforms all the time. But most of the time, it's pretty much one-to-one, and we don't have, like Jasmin said earlier, we have this abstraction above all of this, right? So we don't always write native Vulkan or native Metal, depending on platform. We have this abstraction, so generic classes that we use to convert. And then I would say 95% of the time, it works out of the box, and automation works on Mac and Linux. So we don't waste time going back on a Mac testing if we were on Linux. So But yeah, so we all have a Linux or Mac box under our desks. Yep.
Gotcha. One more. Let's see here. Ryland from the forum wanted to know, how long is the roadmap for Flame development? Does it look 1 year into the future, 3, 5, 10? I know, Jasmine, you said that like Steve McNeil is looking long term. I don't know if there's any more you can give on that.
The vision is always made looking really long term, like 3 to 5 years or more. Obviously, we out of this vision, we usually take the bigger rocks or the more important stuff, and we put this first, and then we like basically estimate how much time it will take to get there, and what's the proper order to execute things, because sometimes to achieve like a vision you need this piece and this piece and this piece, so we order them in a we put them in an order that makes sense, and so this can be like about a year or so, and then for the next few months, then we go into even more detail about the first epics or first projects that we want to go in, and then do some client validations and see how we're gonna actually materialize these and solve these problems. So the more you go, the more higher level it is, but the vision can be really high level because there's a lot of things we cannot do them all, but we at least we have a really good idea of where we want to go, and then the more close to time you go, the more like precise the things are, and the more
Everything more like specific or granular you can get. Right? Totally. One last one, and then we'll wrap everything up. This is from our friend Finn. He was wondering if the developers at Autodesk only work on one software at a time, or are members of the team put on different software packages like Maya and things like that?
Most of them are working on a single app at a time. Not all of them, but in the Flame team, I would say 90% of the members are working solely on Flame family products.
Gotcha.
But for example, for the Silicon project, right, Maya also is doing also that work. So we are talking to them to see what are their challenges and what are their problem and the solution that they found, so that we can share that information between all the different groups that are doing that transition.
Gotcha.
Yeah, we have some other. Sorry,
Sorry, Jasmine.
There are some other.
Yes, go. I've been waiting all show to do that, so thank you.
There are some other teams that are there to support multiple teams, like the build systems and the licensing and so on and so forth. So these are obviously serving multiple products.
Sure.
Yeah, and for Vulkan also, like there are multiple projects at Autodesk where people are working on moving to Vulkan Metal APIs, right? So obviously we're talking with them and we're trying to follow their lead also, depending on where they are. But we're not the only ones working on this, fortunately. Yep.
Well, great. Well, I want to thank the three of you for coming on today. Again, thank you for this insight into the development process. It's always fascinating to see under the hood and kind of understand the challenges that you face. You know, as users, we're typically only seeing either the finished product, or even like as a beta tester, we see something that's suitable to be given to beta testers, in terms of its development process. So it's always wonderful to have this insight. So thank you very much for your time and all the love that you put into our favorite app.
Thanks for the invitation.
Of course, anytime. I'll let the three of you go over to the patrons chat. Jeff and I'll be there in a minute. We're just going to wrap things up here. And again, thank you again very much.
Thank you.
You got it. Bye. All right, let's do a little Logik prize time. Center myself in the wheel. Okay, I have a couple pieces of merch to give away, and then the license of optics. It's very sunny outside today, so we're going to do 2 Logik hats. Let's do that. I'm going to shuffle up the wheel here. All right, and then we'll spin the wheel, and Todd Mesher. Congratulations. All right, we'll spin one more time for another hat, and that's going to Brother Mark. Congratulations, Mark. All right. Let's shuffle off one final time and spin the wheel. And this is for a license of optics from Boris Effects. That's going to Brian Bailey. Congratulations, Brian. All right. Let's turn this damn thing off. Slideshow. Okay. Coming up on Logic Live. Jeff, I've done it. I've hidden my... I can't find the window. There it is. Okay. Coming up on Logic Live this coming Saturday at 2 p.m., we're going to say hello to our sponsor, Hot Spring. It's going to be hosted by me, and we're going to take a look at the services that they offer, the outsourcing services for things like Roto and Paint and comp support, 3D tracking, and so on. They're going to be on Saturday, September 10th at 2 p.m. And then on Sunday, it's the September 25th. I didn't want to leave that so vague. I apologize, Jeff, as I frantically typed up this slide during the show. Jeff's going to be
Brian
on,
Bailey, by the way.
And I screwed up. Oh, I screwed up everything. Hold on. This is terrible. So Sunday, September 25th at 2 p.m., Jeff Kyle is actually going to host Connected Conform Workflow Updates with Brian Bailey. So I'm just going to quickly move past this slide. Sorry, Jeff.
At least Brian has a new hat.
Right? Exactly. Let's be grateful for that. Hold on. I want to encourage everybody, if you haven't signed up for the forum, please do it, forum.logic.tv. It'll make a certain guy in Chicago very, very happy. And while you're there, be sure to be on the Logic Discord. Oh, actually, Christoph, thank you very, very, very much for bringing that up. Okay? Whoever gets, I'm going to bring this on screen right now. All right. Actually, let me bring myself back up so it's a little less distracting. Coming up, and we'll definitely promote this. Hopefully with a smaller super than this. Wow, I got to change the default font on these things. Anybody who's going to be able to make it to IBC, drop by the waterfront on Saturday. They're going to do a Logic meetup, and again, we'll make sure that that's promoted on the forum. Thank you very much, Christoph, for reminding us. And thank you very much, Christoph. Okay. Moving on. Discord. Hell of a wrap-up we're doing today, Jeff, don't you think? This episode of Logic Live is going to join all of its friends on Logic.tv later today. If you haven't checked out Brian Bailey's interview on the Logic Podcast, please do. We have, I think it's 3 new episodes in production right now of the Logic Podcast, so they should be out shortly. Smash that like and subscribe button on the YouTube channel if you have not already. And thank you to all of our patrons for making what we do at Logic here possible. We could not do what we do without your support. If you'd like to become a patron, you can do so by going over to patreon.com/LogicTV. Get your merch at the Logic merch store. If you need tech support, you can call Jack Horrocks at jack@flametech.com.au. If you need anything in the way of image plugins, get them from Boris Effects. They're the best. And be sure you use the Logic-15 discount code and save yourself 15% at checkout. Thank you, AJA, and thank you, Hot Spring, for sponsoring Logic Live. That's going to do it for this week. I want to thank all my guests. I want to thank Jeff Kyle, and we will see you all next time. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great week.
Thanks, everybody.